Have you seen all the books written about Custer's last stand? That's a whole lot of books to sift through. If you want to learn more about the battle, here's my top 5 book recommendations. Now for this list, I'm staying away from the popular narrative style books you might be familiar with. I'm not knocking those books. For the most part, they're really well done. And if you have a favorite author that wrote one, then go for it. But the thing is, all these modern authors are relying on the same primary sources, the accounts written by the actual participants and eyewitnesses. And if you're really serious about discovering more about this battle, then just cut out the middleman and go straight to the source. The books on this list are in no particular order, and I'm going to throw some Amazon affiliate links in this video's description if you're interested in ordering any of these books. If you use those links, I might get a little bit of taste, and you'll be helping to support this channel too. So let's start with some of the first people to develop theories about the battle, the Army officers who were there. In the years and decades after the battle, they wrote letters to each other, refined their thoughts and theories, and then began publishing their ideas in articles in journals. The first book I recommend collects many of these letters and articles, so you're getting an unfiltered view at those officers' opinions. And that book is The Custer Myth by William Graham. This guy right here. Now, Graham was also an Army officer, and so he was able to rub elbows with many of the officers at the Little Bighorn who survived into the 20th century. Graham's book is great for the many sources of information that are compiled here. There's a letter from Captain Benteen to his wife where he doesn't hold back his opinion of other officers' performance in the fight. There's also an entire chapter of letters between Major Reno and Thomas Rosser, who went to West Point with George Custer, fought against Custer in the Civil War, and defended Custer's reputation after his death. And important bedrock articles by Edward Godfrey are also archived here. Of course, some of the theories these guys came up with have been disproven in the years since the fight, but this is still an important book that establishes a foundation for following interpretations. Now, this book is obviously very officer heavy, and the officers only played a small part of the overall battle. Now, if you think of the Custer Myth as like a rich guy drink, what do rich people drink? Martinis? Scotch? Okay, so if you think of the Custer Myth as like a scotch or something, then this next book is going to be like the common man's drink. Probably like a good all-American beer. While Graham communicated primarily with Army officers, another researcher talked to anyone he could find. Walter Camp is the patron saint of history nerds who do it part-time for the love of the game. He never served in the Army or fought in any war. He was a railroad engineer who had a passion for the West and had dreams of writing the definitive book on the Indian Wars. To that end, he traveled all over the country and talked to everyone. Tribal chiefs, former soldiers, old scouts and frontiersmen. Walter Camp used his railroad access to see them all. There are stories about Indians waiting outside Camp's Chicago office to get advice from him before making the trip to Washington, D.C. Camp also had the engineering skills to create maps of the Little Bighorn battlefield, maps that are still helpful today. Now, Walter Camp died before he could write his book, but we have access to his research notes, and those notes form the basis of my next recommendation, Custer in 76, Walter Camp's Notes on the Custer Fight, edited by Kenneth Hammer. Now, if you can see, this book has definitely some mileage on it. I got this in, it's either Oregon or Ohio. I think it was a state that started with an O. And if you look, it's got a little message in the front. Irene gave me this book for my 68th birthday, 7/10 of 90. Well, Irene, you have great taste, because this book is chock full of eyewitness details you can't find anywhere else, from all sorts of perspectives. This book is cited by secondary sources time and again as a critical resource. Historians depend on testimonies and accounts, but this only gets you so far. For a more complete picture, you also have to utilize archaeology, the study of physical artifacts. Now, back in the 80s, a large grass fire scorched the battlefield, which ended up being a blessing in disguise. It cleared away the grass and brush so that archaeologists had unimpeded access to artifacts that had been hidden for over a century. Over the next couple of decades, multiple site surveys collected and cataloged many of these artifacts, which revolutionized our understanding of the battle. While there are a few books that document the results of the surveys that you can pick from, I'd recommend Uncovering History, Archaeological Investigations at the Little Bighorn by Douglas Scott. This book has a lot of the results of the field surveys. Just a warning though, it was written by an archaeologist for other archaeologists, so it can be very dry. But if you have any sort of an interest in the results of those 1980s investigations, the hard archaeology that helps illustrate the battle, you need one of these books. Another book for those of us who like pictures is Where Custer Fell, Photographs of the Little Bighorn Battlefield, Then and Now, by James Brust, Brian Pohanka, and Sandy Barnard. If you watched any of the Civil War documentaries on the History Channel back in like the 90s, you've seen Brian Pohanka before. The idea behind this book sounds deceptively simple. Take modern photographs where antique photographs of the Little Bighorn Battlefield were taken and compare the images. In reality, this process yields a huge amount of info on the battlefield, how stable some marker locations have been over the years, or how certain topographical features have changed. Plus, the authors pepper the text with references and stories to help tie events to certain geographic areas. This book is a great example of thinking outside the box. I'd say the only way to improve this book is have some color photographs in here, because some of the descriptions of marker locations rely on stuff like bushes, and it can be a little bit tough to see in black and white or grayscale. But other than that, this book is impressive. My next recommendation is a little bit of a sentimental one. In my experience, when people look at the Little Bighorn Battlefield, they see one of two things: an epic fight between two civilizations, or a bunch of stones dotting some hills. One of the reasons I ever got interested in this battle in the first place was because of a book I read as a kid back in the Malmstrom Air Force Base Library's children's section. And that book is The Custer Battle by Paul Goebel. Paul Goebel's book illustrations are influenced by native ledger art. They bring color and a unique perspective to Western events. Now, this particular book is written from the point of view of a fictional teenage warrior, but Goebel also includes italicized text boxes that explain the flow of the battle. It's never too early to start capturing the imaginations of the next generation of history nerds, and I think this book does it better than anybody else. Now, I'm sure I left out one of your favorites on this list, so now's your opportunity to tell me about it. What books on this list do you agree with, and what does your own list look like? Leave a comment, and don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when the next Story Out West video drops. Thanks for watching.